I was driving home after a long and exhausting trip. It was late at night, and the rural road stretched endlessly, surrounded by cornfields that seemed to go on forever. The silence there was different, heavy, like the darkness itself swallowed any noise except for the hum of my engine. When I spotted a small gas station by the side of the road, I decided to stop. My tank was still half full, but the idea of stretching my legs and grabbing a coffee seemed like a good one. The place was old-fashioned, just a single cashier and a vending machine at the entrance. A crackling old radio played some muffled country music in the background. Two men were talking near the gas pump. They looked like locals, dressed in worn-out clothes with faces weathered by the sun. As I paid for my coffee, I overheard bits of their conversation. "Again tonight," one of them said in a low voice. The other nodded, frowning. This time it was clearer, almost like a kid calling. I pretended not to listen, but a chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my coffee and headed straight for my car, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling their words left in me. It was probably just small-town talk, something to spook strangers. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. I got back into my car, locked the doors out of habit, and took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and lukewarm, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get back on the road. As I pulled out of the gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that the two men were still watching me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and sure enough, they were standing there, staring in my direction. My stomach twisted a little, but I forced myself to focus on the road ahead. It was probably nothing, just two bored locals with nothing better to do. The road was even darker now, with no streetlights and only the occasional reflective marker breaking up the void. The cornfields on either side felt taller, almost like walls closing in. My high beams barely cut through the night, and the further I drove, the more I became aware of how alone I was. No houses, no other cars, nothing but the endless stretch of road and the looming stalks of corn. I tried turning on the radio to fill the silence, but all I got was static. Great. I left it off and focused on driving, but my mind kept drifting back to what the men had said. A kid calling for help? In the middle of the fields? It didn't make sense. About 20 minutes passed, and the road remained empty. The further I got from the gas station, the more isolated everything felt. My headlights swept across the endless rows of corn, casting eerie shadows that flickered and stretched in unnatural ways. The occasional gust of wind made the stalks sway, and in the silence of the night, it almost sounded like whispers. I tried to push the thought away, gripping the wheel a little tighter. It was just the wind, nothing else. Then I heard it. At first, it was faint, almost like a distant echo, a voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable pleading. My hands instinctively tightened on the steering wheel, and my foot hovered over the brake. I glanced at my mirrors. Nothing, just darkness, but the voice was there. It was coming from somewhere outside. I slowed down, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then, clear as day, it came again. A small, desperate voice from the fields. "Help me." I slammed the brakes harder than I meant to, the tires skidding slightly on the pavement. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the road ahead, then the mirrors, then the cornfields on either side. Nothing. It sounded so close, but there was no one there. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my breathing uneven. My gut was screaming at me to drive away, to ignore it. But what if it was real? What if a kid was actually out there, lost, scared? I swallowed hard, my eyes flicking to the passenger seat, then to the phone mounted on the dashboard. No service, of course. Typical. I hesitated, then lowered my window just a crack, enough to listen. The night air was thick and damp, carrying only the rustling of the corn. Silence. Maybe I had imagined it. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Please, don't let him get me." A cold wave of fear crawled up my spine. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel, and every instinct in me screamed, "Don't get out of the car." I couldn't see anyone, but the voice, it sounded so real, so close. I turned my high beams toward the cornfield, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything. But all I saw was the endless stretch of stalks, moving slightly in the breeze. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My mind raced through possibilities. Could it be a trick? A recording? But who the hell would be out here, in the middle of nowhere, playing games like that? My breathing was shallow, my pulse pounding in my ears. The rational part of me kept saying, "Just go, just drive." But the voice, it was just a kid, a kid. Could I really just leave? My fingers hovered over the door handle, and then something moved in the corn. The sound was subtle at first, just a rustling, but then it became unmistakable. Something was shifting through the stalks, coming closer. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. The voice had stopped. The night was dead silent again, except for the slow, deliberate movement in the cornfield. I couldn't see anything beyond the first few rows, but I felt it. Something was there, hidden just beyond the reach of my headlights. My stomach twisted into knots. I slammed my window shut and locked the doors, my fingers fumbling on the controls. Every hair on my body stood on end. I wasn't waiting to find out what was out there. I shoved the car into drive, my foot heavy on the gas. The second I hit the accelerator, the voice came again, this time right by my ear. "Please, don't leave me," I screamed. The voice hadn't come from outside. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I sped forward. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the car steady. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, dreading to see something in the back seat. But it was empty. Nothing but darkness and the faint glow of my taillights reflecting off the road. I was breathing so fast I felt lightheaded, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't even think. I just needed to get away. The cornfield stretched endlessly on either side, but I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead. I turned the radio knob out of sheer desperation, needing some kind of noise to drown out the silence. Static, nothing but dead air. And then, in the middle of that static, the voice returned, whispering, pleading, "He's coming." I nearly lost control of the car. The wheels veered slightly to the right, skimming the gravel shoulder before I yanked the steering wheel back. I didn't want to know, but the voice, it wasn't stopping. It was right there, inside the car with me, threading through the static. My stomach twisted violently as the temperature inside the car seemed to drop. I could see my breath fogging up in the air, my fingers trembling against the wheel. I refused to look. I couldn't look. The road ahead blurred, my headlights cutting through the night like flimsy blades. I was driving too fast, but I didn't care. I just had to get out of there. But then the worst thing happened. The radio cut out completely. The static vanished. And in the absolute silence that followed, something breathed right behind me. A cold, rattling breath, slow, deliberate, like something was right there, leaning in. I wanted to turn around, I needed to, but my body wouldn't obey. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white, my vision tunnelling on the empty road ahead. My foot pressed harder on the gas, the speedometer climbing past 80-90. The car felt unsteady, but slowing down wasn't an option. I wasn't alone. Then the breath came again, closer this time. My mind screamed at me to look, but something deeper, more primal, told me not to. I focused on the rearview mirror instead, forcing myself to see without turning my head. At first, it was just shadows, shifting in the dim light. But then, I saw it. A shape barely visible, sitting in the back seat. No eyes, no features, just there, solid and wrong. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The air in the car felt thick, heavy, like something was pressing down on me. Then, in the quiet, that same voice whispered one last time, "He found me." I nearly lost control of the car. My entire body locked up, my vision swimming as raw panic took over. The shape in the back seat, it wasn't moving, but I felt it, pressing against reality itself, like it wasn't supposed to be there. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking violently as I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to focus on the road ahead. I was flying past the speed limit, but I didn't care. My only thought was to get as far away as possible. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, and for the first time, I realized how alone I was. No cars, no houses, just the endless stretch of road and the towering cornfields. Then, the shape in the back seat shifted, not a normal movement. Not like a person adjusting in their seat. It was wrong, almost fluid, like it was unraveling and folding in on itself at the same time. My stomach churned violently, nausea clawing up my throat. I slammed my foot on the gas, my entire body screaming to get away. The voice whispered again, softer now, almost regretful, "I'm sorry." The air inside the car felt thick, suffocating, as if something invisible was pressing down on me. My ears were ringing, my body screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was trapped inside with it. Then I felt it move closer. Not with sound, there were no footsteps, no shifting of weight. Just a sickening pressure, like something was leaning forward from the back seat, inching toward me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything, but I was frozen. And then it spoke one last time, right by my ear. I just obeyed. My foot slammed down on the gas pedal, the engine roaring as the speedometer climbed past 100. The road blurred, my headlights bouncing off the endless cornfields. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care, I just had to keep moving. The pressure behind me lifted, like whatever had been there was satisfied. My breath was still shaky, my chest tight, but I felt somehow like I was being let go. Then, suddenly, the voice was gone. No breath, no whispers. Just silence. And when I finally gathered the courage to glance at the rearview mirror, the back seat was empty. I thought I was safe, But then I noticed something that nearly made my heart stop. The radio, it had been off the entire time. And the worst part? As I finally slowed the car down, heart still racing, I saw something in the road ahead. A single footprint pressed deep into the asphalt, like someone had been standing there, waiting.